I never thought my space heater would become the center of a legal nightmare. But when Sharon Whitmore from the Pinecrest Valley HOA knocked on my door that freezing January morning in Denver, Colorado, I knew my peaceful life was about to get complicated. "Isaac Donnelly?" she asked, clipboard clutched against her wool coat like it was the 10 Commandments. "That's me," I said, keeping the door mostly closed to trap the heat inside. The temperature had dropped to -5 degrees overnight, and my little 2-bedroom townhouse was struggling to stay warm even with the central heating running full blast. "I'm Sharon Whitmore, president of the Pinecrest Valley Homeowners Association. We've received multiple complaints about an unauthorized heating appliance visible in your front window." She gestured toward my living room, where my trusty ceramic space heater sat humming away near my desk. I blinked at her. "You're talking about my space heater." According to Section 7.4 of the HOA bylaws, all heating appliances must be approved by the board before installation. You failed to submit the proper request form in triplicate. "It's a plug-in space heater from Target," I said, trying to keep the disbelief out of my voice. I didn't realize I needed permission to keep myself from freezing. Sharon's expression hardened. "Rules are rules, Mr. Donnelly. I'm issuing you a formal citation. You have 48 hours to remove the unauthorized appliance or face fines of $100 per day." "Are you serious right now? It's -5 degrees outside. The community heating system is more than adequate for all units. We have standards to maintain." She handed me a yellow form that looked like it had been printed in 1987. 48 hours. I watched her march back to her black Lexus, her heels clicking on the icy sidewalk despite the weather. This was insane. I'd moved into Pinecrest Valley 6 months ago, attracted by the reasonable HOA fees and the location near my job as a software developer for a medical equipment company. The neighborhood was nice enough, with rows of identical beige townhouses arranged around a central park. But I'd quickly learned that Sharon Whitmore ran the HOA like her own personal fiefdom. I closed the door and looked at my space heater. The thing had cost me $39. It was currently supplementing my central heating because the main system seemed to struggle whenever temperatures dropped below 20 degrees. I'd mentioned it to maintenance twice, but they'd assured me everything was functioning normally. My phone rang. It was my neighbor, Marcus Chen from Unit 247. "Dude, did the HOA witch just hit you up too?" Marcus asked. "Yeah, about my space heater. This is ridiculous. She got me for having a wreath on my door past January 6th. Apparently, all holiday decorations must be removed within 5 days of the holiday ending. I didn't even celebrate Christmas. It was just a winter wreath from my mom." "What are you going to do? Pay the stupid fine, I guess. It's not worth fighting." Last year, this guy tried to fight them about his satellite dish and they made his life hell. Legal fees, constant inspections, threats of liens. He eventually moved. After hanging up, I spent the evening researching Colorado HOA law. Turned out HOAs had broad authority, but they couldn't violate habitability standards. If someone needed supplemental heating for health or safety reasons, they generally had to accommodate it. The problem was proving the central system was inadequate. The next morning, I called a heating inspection company. A technician named Rob showed up that afternoon, a middle-aged guy with a thick mustache and a no-nonsense attitude. "Let's see what we're working with," he said, checking the thermostat. I'd set it to 72, but the digital display showed 66 degrees. Rob spent an hour examining the system, checking vents, measuring airflow, and testing the furnace in the utility closet. Finally, he straightened up and shook his head. "Your furnace is undersized for this unit," he said. Probably someone trying to save money during construction. It'll keep you alive in mild weather, but once it drops below 20 outside, you're going to struggle to maintain comfortable temperatures. Below zero, forget it. You absolutely need supplemental heating. Can you write that down? Sure thing. He typed up a report on his tablet and emailed it to me. That'll be $150 for the inspection. Armed with the report, I drafted a formal response to the HOA. I explained that the central heating was insufficient, attached the inspection report, and cited Colorado statutes about habitability. I delivered it to the HOA office personally that evening. The office was in a converted garage near the front of the development. Sharon was inside, along with two other board members I recognized from the neighborhood newsletter. Patricia Montgomery, the vice president, and Dale Fisher, the treasurer. They all looked to be in their mid-50s, dressed like they were attending a country club meeting. "Mr. Donnelly," Sharon said, not looking up from her computer. "Here to comply with the citation, here to appeal it." I handed her my letter. "I had the heating system inspected. It's inadequate. I need the space heater for habitability." Sharon skimmed the letter, her expression souring with each paragraph. "This is highly irregular. What's irregular is demanding someone freeze in their own home." Patricia leaned over to read the letter. "The inspection report says the furnace is undersized." "That's what the licensed HVAC technician found," I said. Dale cleared his throat. "If the furnaces are undersized, that could affect multiple units." Sharon shot him a look that could have frozen water. "The furnaces were installed according to specifications when this development was built in 2018. They've been functioning fine for years." "Have they?" I asked. "Have you surveyed residents about whether they're satisfied with the heating?" "That's not your concern," Sharon snapped. "The board will review your appeal and provide a response within 10 business days. The citation gives me 48 hours. 10 business days is 2 weeks. Then I suggest you comply with the citation while we review your appeal." "That's not how this works." "If I'm appealing, enforcement should be suspended pending the appeal." Sharon stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "Mr. Donnelly, I've been running this HOA for 12 years. I don't need some newcomer telling me how to do my job." "You will comply with the citation or face the consequences." I left the office fuming. This was petty tyranny at its finest, but I wasn't about to let some power-hungry HOA president bully me into freezing. Over the next few days, I did nothing. The space heater stayed exactly where it was. I also started talking to my neighbors. Turned out, I wasn't the only one having heating issues. Marcus's unit also struggled in cold weather. So did Lisa Henderson's in Unit 289 and the elderly couple in Unit 221, the Thompsons. But most people were either using space heaters secretly or just dealing with the cold, afraid to challenge the HOA. On the third day, I found a new citation taped to my door. Fines of $100 per day were now in effect. I'd accumulated $200 in fines so far. I called a lawyer. Her name was Jennifer Lang, and she specialized in HOA disputes. Her office was in downtown Denver, a sleek high-rise with a view of the mountains. "HOAs can be tricky," Jennifer said, reviewing my documents. She was in her early 40s, professional but approachable. "They have a lot of authority, but they can't violate habitability standards or discriminate. Your inspection report is good. The fact that they're fining you for something related to basic heating could be construed as a habitability violation. Can they actually collect these fines?" "Eventually, yes. If you don't pay, they can put a lien on your property and even foreclose. But that takes time and legal process. What I'd recommend is sending them a formal demand letter, threatening legal action if they don't rescind the citation. That might scare them into backing down. And if it doesn't, then we file suit. But that's expensive and time-consuming. Let's try the letter first. Jennifer drafted a strongly worded letter citing Colorado law, habitability standards, and the potential for damages if they continued to interfere with my ability to heat my home. She mentioned the Americans with Disabilities Act too, noting that while I didn't have a disability, the elderly Thompsons in Unit 221 might, and if the HOA was creating a hostile environment around heating, that could be discriminatory. We sent the letter via certified mail and email. Sharon signed for it 2 days later. The response came faster than I expected. Sharon called me directly that evening. "Mr. Donnelly, I've reviewed your lawyer's letter with our HOA attorney. We're prepared to offer a compromise." "I'm listening." "We'll waive the fines if you agree to remove the space heater from the front window. You can use it in a back room where it's not visible from the street." "So you're still demanding I not use supplemental heating where I need it?" "We're offering a reasonable accommodation that preserves the community's aesthetic standards. My desk is in the front room. That's where I work from home. That's where I need the heat." "Then I'm afraid we're at an impasse. The fines will continue to accrue." "Sharon, this is insane. You're violating habitability standards over aesthetics. We're enforcing community standards that every resident agreed to when they purchased their property." "You're not special, Mr. Donnelly." She hung up. By mid-February, I'd accumulated $2,000 in fines. I hadn't paid any of them. Jennifer advised me to keep detailed records of everything, including daily temperature readings in my unit and outside. I started a spreadsheet. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, it was -8 degrees outside. My thermostat was set to 72, but my unit stayed at 64 degrees all day. Without the space heater, it would have been much colder. Then, on February 20th, everything changed. I woke up at 6 in the morning to a phone call from Marcus. "Dude, my heat's completely out." "Is yours working?" I checked. The furnace was running, but barely any warm air was coming out. I called maintenance. The line was busy. I tried again. Still busy. By 8 in the morning, it was clear something major had happened. The community Facebook group was exploding with complaints. "No heat in Unit 247. No heat in Unit 289. Unit 221, Unit 198, Unit 312. Dozens of units affected. The temperature outside was -12 degrees. Inside my townhouse, despite the struggling furnace, it was 60 degrees and dropping. I cranked up my space heater. At 9 o'clock, the HOA sent out an email blast. The community's main heating boiler had failed overnight. They were working on repairs. Residents should stay warm as best they could. Estimated repair time was unknown. I immediately emailed back, copying Jennifer on it. "Given the heating system failure, I trust the citation regarding my space heater is now rescinded. Many residents will need supplemental heating while repairs are ongoing." No response. By noon, my unit was 58 degrees despite the space heater running constantly. The small furnace was barely functioning. I put on thermal layers and kept working. The community Facebook group had descended into chaos. People were panicking. The Thompsons, the elderly couple, had a daughter who was threatening to sue if her parents got hypothermia. Lisa Henderson had 2 young kids and was considering going to a hotel. Marcus was talking about breaking his lease. At 2 o'clock, I walked over to the HOA office. A crowd had already gathered outside. Sharon, Patricia, and Dale were inside, looking overwhelmed. "We need answers," someone shouted. Sharon came to the door. "Please, everyone, we're doing everything we can. The boiler is being repaired." "When will it be fixed?" Lisa Henderson demanded, her kids bundled in winter coats beside her. The technician said possibly by tonight, but it might take longer. The system is old. How old? I asked. Sharon's eyes locked onto mine. That's not relevant. It's absolutely relevant. How old is the boiler? Dale Fisher, the treasurer, looked uncomfortable. The main boiler was installed when the development was built in 2018, but it was a refurbished unit. Refurbished from when? Jennifer had coached me on what questions to ask. Dale hesitated. I'd have to check the records. Check them now, Marcus said. We're freezing. We all followed them into the office, a crowd of about 20 angry residents. Dale pulled up files on the computer. His face went pale. According to this, the boiler was originally manufactured in 1992. It was refurbished in 2017 and installed here in 2018. An uproar erupted. The HOA had installed a 26-year-old boiler even if it had been refurbished. Why would you do that? Someone asked. Sharon's composure was cracking. It was a cost-saving measure. The budget was tight during construction. The boiler was certified as functional. Certified by whom? I pressed. She didn't answer. Mrs. Thompson's daughter spoke up. My parents are 78 and 81 years old. This temperature is dangerous for them. If anything happens, I will sue this HOA personally. We'll put them up in a hotel, Patricia offered quickly. You'll put everyone up in hotels, Marcus said. Or fix this now. By evening, the situation had deteriorated further. The temperature outside had dropped to -15 degrees. Inside my unit, despite running both the space heater and the struggling furnace, it was 55 degrees. I could see my breath. The boiler repair wasn't going well. Around 7 o'clock, the technician emerged from the boiler room and spoke with Sharon. I was close enough to hear. The whole system needs to be replaced, the technician said. I can patch it temporarily, but it's going to fail again. This thing should have been replaced years ago. How long for a temporary patch? Sharon asked. Maybe tomorrow afternoon if I can get the parts. But like I said, it's temporary. You need a new boiler. How much would that cost for a development this size? Probably $250,000 installed. Maybe more. Sharon went pale. The technician left. Sharon called an emergency board meeting right there in the office. I stayed outside with other residents, listening through the thin walls. We don't have $250,000, Dale was saying. The reserve fund has $80,000. We'd have to do a special assessment. How much per unit? Patricia asked. Roughly $3,000 per unit, give or take. People will never agree to that, Sharon said. They won't have a choice if the system fails completely, Dale replied. I pulled out my phone and texted Jennifer an update. She responded immediately. Document everything. Take photos, videos, temperature readings. This is huge. The temporary patch took until February 22nd to implement. For 2 full days, the development had essentially no heat. People were furious. Several families went to hotels at their own expense. The Thompsons were taken in by their daughter. Marcus stayed with his girlfriend in Boulder. I stayed in my unit with my space heater, working from home in 3 layers of clothing and a blanket. I took temperature readings every 2 hours and documented everything. When the heat finally came back online, it was a relief but not a solution. Everyone knew the system could fail again at any moment. On February 23rd, I received another citation for keeping my space heater in the front window during the heating crisis. I couldn't believe it. I actually laughed when I read it. Sharon was doubling down. I scanned the citation and sent it to Jennifer. She called me within 5 minutes. She cited you for using supplemental heat during a heating system failure. Jennifer's voice was incredulous. That's insane. That's not just a habitability violation that could be seen as retaliation. What do? We sue. File an injunction first to stop the fines and citations, then a full lawsuit for harassment, retaliation, and habitability violations. We can also report them to the state regulators for the boiler issue. A 26-year-old refurbished boiler serving 80 units. That's a safety issue. Let's do it. Jennifer filed the injunction the next day in Denver County Court. We also submitted a formal complaint to the Colorado Division of Housing, which oversees HOA compliance with state regulations. The injunction hearing was set for March 5th. In the meantime, the community was in turmoil. Sharon called a mandatory HOA meeting for March 1st to discuss the special assessment for a new boiler. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a large room with folding chairs and terrible acoustics. Every single unit sent at least one representative. The room was packed. Sharon stood at the front with Patricia and Dale, all three looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Thank you all for coming," Sharon began. "As you know, we've experienced issues with the heating system. The board has obtained quotes for a complete boiler replacement. The cost is $260,000. This will require a special assessment of $3,250 per unit." The room exploded. "You installed a 30-year-old boiler, and now we have to pay for your mistake. Why wasn't this in the reserve fund? I can't afford $3,000 right now." Sharon tried to maintain control. The original boiler installation was a cost-effective decision made by the developer. The board has managed the reserve fund responsibly, but heating system replacement wasn't scheduled until 2030. Because you thought a refurbished boiler from 1992 would last until 2030, Marcus stood up. "That's not responsible management, that's negligence." "I second that," Lisa Henderson called out. "My kids were freezing for 2 days. We went to a hotel. Are you reimbursing us? The HOA isn't responsible for accommodation costs during emergency repairs," Patricia said, reading from a paper. "Then we're not responsible for paying for a new boiler," someone shouted. The meeting devolved into chaos. Sharon tried to call for order, but nobody was listening. Finally, she adjourned the meeting without a vote. As people filed out, Mrs. Thompson's daughter approached me. Her name was Rachel. "Isaac, right? Marcus told me you're suing the HOA." "That's right. Can I join? My parents were seriously endangered by this. Talk to my lawyer." Jennifer Lang downtown. Over the next few days, 3 more residents contacted Jennifer about joining the lawsuit. Marcus, Lisa Henderson, and the Thompsons through Rachel. Jennifer restructured it as a class action on behalf of all residents affected by the heating failure and the HOA's retaliatory practices. The injunction hearing arrived. Jennifer, myself, and the other plaintiffs sat on one side of the courtroom. Sharon, Patricia, Dale, and their HOA attorney, a nervous-looking man named Gregory Moss, sat on the other. The judge was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Sanderson. Jennifer presented our case efficiently. She showed the citations against me, the inspection report proving inadequate heating, the timeline of the boiler failure, and the subsequent citation during the crisis. She argued this was clear retaliation and a habitability violation. Gregory Moss, the HOA attorney, tried to argue that the citations were legitimate enforcement of community standards, unrelated to the boiler failure. Judge Sanderson cut him off. "Counselor, your client cited this man for using a space heater while the community heating system was non-functional during negative-degree temperatures. How is that reasonable? The citation was for the location of the heater, Your Honor, not its use. A distinction without a difference. The effect is the same, punishing a resident for staying warm." She looked at her notes. "I'm granting the injunction. All citations against Mr. Donnelly and any other residents for supplemental heating devices are suspended pending resolution of the underlying lawsuit. Additionally, the HOA is prohibited from issuing any new citations related to heating appliances until the community heating system is fully replaced and certified adequate. It was a complete victory. Sharon's face was bright red as we left the courtroom, but things were just getting started. The next week, the Colorado Division of Housing sent inspectors to Pinecrest Valley. They examined the boiler, reviewed installation records, and interviewed residents. Their report, released on March 15th, was damning. The refurbished boiler had been installed without proper permits. The HOA had used an unlicensed contractor to save money. The boiler was undersized for the development's actual needs, and the individual furnaces in each unit were also undersized, exactly as my inspection had found. The division issued a formal violation notice. The HOA had 30 days to submit a plan for complete heating system replacement, and 60 days to begin implementation. Failure to comply could result in fines of up to $10,000 per day and potential criminal charges against the board members for reckless endangerment. When that news broke, Sharon, Patricia, and Dale all tried to resign from the board. Too late. On March 20th, the district attorney's office announced they were opening a criminal investigation into the HOA board's conduct. Specifically, they were looking at whether the board had knowingly created dangerous living conditions and whether there had been any financial impropriety in the original boiler installation. It turned out there had been. The DA's investigation uncovered that Sharon's husband, David Whitmore, owned a stake in the contracting company that had installed the refurbished boiler. Sharon had never disclosed this conflict of interest. The contractor had given the HOA a steep discount in exchange for not having to pull permits or use licensed technicians for certain work. The HOA had saved money, David's company had made a profit off the books, and residents had been left with a dangerously inadequate heating system. In early April, as Denver finally started warming up, criminal charges were filed. Sharon Whitmore was charged with conflict of interest violations, fraud, and reckless endangerment. Patricia Montgomery and Dale Fisher were charged as accessories for knowingly going along with the scheme. The trial was scheduled for August. Meanwhile, the civil lawsuit moved forward. Jennifer had expanded it to include claims of fraud, negligence, breach of fiduciary duty, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We were seeking damages for hotel costs, space heater purchases, increased utility bills, and emotional distress. We were also demanding the HOA pay for the complete heating system replacement without a special assessment, since the current situation was the result of their misconduct. In May, the HOA's insurance company settled. They agreed to pay $800,000 to cover the heating system replacement and damages to residents. Each affected household received approximately $4,000 in compensation. The new boiler and updated furnaces were installed by a properly licensed contractor in June. The criminal trial was straightforward. The prosecution presented emails between Sharon and her husband discussing the boiler deal. They showed how the board had deliberately avoided permits to hide the conflict of interest. They brought in the boiler technician who had done the temporary patch, and he testified that the system was a disaster waiting to happen, and that no competent professional would have installed it that way. Sharon tried to argue she'd just been trying to save the HOA money, but the jury didn't buy it. On August 28th, she was convicted on all counts. Patricia and Dale were convicted as accessories. Sharon was sentenced to 18 months in prison, 3 years probation, and ordered to pay restitution. Patricia and Dale got lighter sentences: 6 months home detention, probation, and community service. By September, Pinecrest Valley had new HOA leadership. Marcus actually ran for the board and won a seat. The new board immediately revised the bylaws, removing absurd restrictions on things like space heaters, holiday decorations, and other petty nonsense Sharon had enforced. They also implemented transparent budgeting, regular system inspections, and resident input requirements for major decisions. I kept my space heater, though I didn't need it anymore. The new furnace in my unit was properly sized and worked perfectly. But I kept it anyway, plugged in near my desk as a reminder. On a cold morning in late January, nearly a year after Sharon had first knocked on my door, I was making coffee when my doorbell rang. It was Marcus. "Hey man, just wanted to tell you thanks," he said. "For what?" "For not backing down. Most people would have just moved the heater or paid the fines. You fought back, and now we've got a functioning HOA that actually serves residents instead of terrorizing them." "I just didn't want to freeze," I said with a smile. "Well, because of that, the Thompsons didn't end up with hypothermia, Lisa's kids stayed safe, and Sharon's in prison where she belongs. So yeah, thanks." After Marcus left, I sat at my desk with my coffee, looking out the front window at the snow-covered park. The space heater hummed quietly beside me, unnecessary but comforting. I'd learned a lot over the past year. I'd learned that HOAs could be tyrannical if left unchecked. I'd learned that standing up to petty authority was exhausting but necessary. I'd learned that most people want to do the right thing but are afraid of rocking the boat. Most importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the smallest acts of resistance, like refusing to move a $39 space heater, could expose much larger problems. My phone buzzed with a message from Jennifer. "Coffee next week. I've got another HOA case you might be interested in hearing about. Nothing as crazy as yours, but still pretty wild." I laughed and replied, "Sure, but I'm staying out of HOA politics from now on." Even as I typed it, I knew it was probably a lie. Once you've fought one battle, it's hard to ignore the next one. But for now, I was content to sit in my warm, properly heated townhouse, drinking coffee and watching the snow fall, knowing that at least in this little corner of Denver, justice had been served. The development looked peaceful in the winter morning light. The new boiler hummed efficiently in its room, sending heat to all 80 units without strain. The furnaces, properly sized and professionally installed, kept every home comfortable. Kids played in the park, bundled in snow gear. Neighbors waved to each other as they scraped ice off their windshields. It looked like a normal HOA community. And maybe that was the point. It should have been normal all along. People should be able to heat their homes without permission slips. They should be able to hang wreaths without citations. They should be able to trust that their HOA board is acting in their best interests, not lining their own pockets with shady contractor deals. Sharon had seen the HOA as her personal kingdom, residents as subjects to be controlled. She'd forgotten the basic truth. The HOA existed to serve the community, not rule it. I thought about all the people who'd been affected by her decisions. The elderly couple who could have died from hypothermia, the young mother whose kids had been cold and scared, the dozens of residents who'd paid thousands in unnecessary assessments over the years for cheaply done maintenance that never lasted. The prosecution had uncovered even more during their investigation. The refurbished boiler wasn't the only corner that had been cut. The roof repairs 2 years ago had used substandard materials. The parking lot resurfacing had been done by an unlicensed crew. All of it had involved companies connected to Sharon's husband, and all of it had been done without proper permits or oversight. The new board was now going through every maintenance record, every contract, every expense report. They'd found irregularities dating back to when Sharon first took office 12 years ago. The insurance settlement had covered the heating system, but there was still tens of thousands of dollars in damage from other shoddy work. David Whitmore's company was being sued separately for fraud and breach of contract. It would take years to fully untangle the mess Sharon had created. But at least it was being addressed now. My laptop chimed with an email notification. It was from the new HOA board president, a retired teacher named Margaret Foster, who actually seemed to understand that community leadership meant service, not power. "Dear residents," the email began. "As we close out the first year of new leadership, I want to thank everyone for your patience as we've worked to restore trust and functionality to our community. The heating system is operating perfectly. We've completed a comprehensive facility audit and developed a 10-year maintenance plan with proper reserve funding. We've also implemented new transparency measures, including monthly financial reports and quarterly town halls. Most importantly, we've remembered that an HOA should enhance community living, not restrict it. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to serve you properly." It was a stark contrast to Sharon's emails, which had always been filled with citations, complaints, and demands. Margaret's leadership style was collaborative rather than authoritarian. It made all the difference. I spent the rest of that morning working on a project for my job, the space heater providing a gentle background warmth that was comforting even though unnecessary. Around noon, I took a break and walked over to the mailboxes. The temperature was 28 degrees, cold but manageable. Inside each mailbox was a small envelope. I opened mine. It was a formal apology letter from the HOA, along with a check for my legal fees, which the insurance settlement had covered beyond the personal damages. The letter acknowledged the board's misconduct, apologized for the harassment and endangerment, and committed to better governance going forward. It was signed by Margaret and the entire new board. Lisa Henderson was also checking her mail. Her kids were at school, so she was alone. "Did you get the apology letter?" she asked. "Just read it. It's surreal. An HOA actually apologizing and taking responsibility. I didn't think that was possible. It shouldn't be surreal. It should be normal. Well, thanks to you, maybe it will be now, at least here." Walking back to my unit, I noticed that several neighbors had space heaters visible in their windows. Small acts of rebellion that were now completely allowed. Nobody was going to get cited. Nobody was going to get fined. People could heat their homes however they needed to. That evening, Marcus hosted a barbecue at his place despite the cold. 15 or 20 residents showed up, standing around his patio heater with beers and burgers, celebrating nothing in particular except the fact that we had a functional community again. "To Isaac," Marcus said, raising his beer, "the man who wouldn't move his heater." Everyone laughed and drank. I felt embarrassed but also proud. I hadn't set out to be anyone's hero. I just wanted to stay warm. But sometimes that's enough. Sometimes refusing to accept unreasonable demands is exactly what's needed to expose deeper corruption. The party went late into the evening. People told stories about their own run-ins with Sharon over the years. Citations for grass being a quarter-inch too long. Fines for parking slightly over the line. Threats for having the wrong color curtains. It had been a reign of petty terror, and everyone had stories. But there was also a sense of relief. That chapter was over. Sharon was in prison. The heating system worked. The HOA was functioning properly. Life could return to normal. Around 10 o'clock, I headed back to my unit. The temperature had dropped to 18 degrees, but inside, my home was a comfortable 70 degrees. The new furnace hummed efficiently in the utility closet. My space heater sat silent at my desk, no longer needed but still present. I made tea and settled in to watch some television, wrapped in a comfortable blanket on my couch. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Saw the news about sentencing. Justice served. Still want to grab that coffee? Definitely, I replied. I owe you about 100 coffees after what you pulled off. Just doing my job. But seriously, your case is going to be cited in HOA law for years. You established some important precedents about habitability and retaliation. You should be proud. I was proud, but also exhausted. Fighting Sharon and the HOA had consumed nearly a year of my life. I'd spent thousands on legal fees before the settlement reimbursed me. I'd dealt with constant stress, uncertainty, and the very real fear that I might lose my home to HOA foreclosure if things went wrong. But I'd also learned that systems of power, even small ones like an HOA board, can be challenged and changed. It takes effort, courage, and often legal help, but it's possible. Sharon had seemed invincible with her clipboard and her citations and her 12 years of authoritarian rule. But she'd been brought down by a simple space heater and a resident who refused to comply with an unjust demand. The next morning, a Saturday, I slept in until 9. When I finally got up and made breakfast, the sun was shining through my front window, illuminating my desk and the space heater beside it. The thermometer outside read 25 degrees. Inside, 71 degrees. Perfect. I spent the day doing ordinary things. Grocery shopping, laundry, a workout at the community gym. Normal life was good. I'd missed it during the months of legal battles and HOA drama. In the evening, I video called my parents in Seattle. They'd been following the saga with a mixture of concern and amusement. So it's finally over. My mom asked, finally. Sharon's in prison, the HOA is functional, the heating works. Life is good. Are you going to stay there or look for a place without an HOA? I'd thought about that question a lot. Part of me wanted to get as far from HOA governance as possible. But another part of me felt invested in Pinecrest Valley now. We'd fought for change and won. It felt wrong to leave now that things were finally working properly. I think I'll stay, I said, at least for a while. Besides, Marcus got elected to the board. Someone needs to keep him honest. My dad laughed. Just stay out of trouble. One lawsuit per lifetime is plenty. After the call, I sat at my desk and pulled up the news articles about the case. There had been coverage in the Denver Post, some local TV news segments, even a piece in a national real estate publication about HOA overreach. The story had resonated because everyone who lived in an HOA had their own horror stories. The comments on the articles were illuminating. Hundreds of people shared their own experiences with tyrannical HOA boards. Ridiculous fines, arbitrary rules, retaliation against anyone who questioned authority. It was a systemic problem across the country, enabled by laws that gave HOAs broad power with minimal oversight. My case had helped shine a light on those issues, at least in Colorado. The state legislature was now considering new regulations for HOA governance, including requirements for regular facility inspections, transparency in board member conflicts of interest, and easier paths for residents to challenge unfair citations. It wouldn't fix everything, but it was a start. As winter turned to spring, life at Pinecrest Valley settled into a comfortable rhythm. The heating system continued to work flawlessly. The new board implemented the promised changes, making the HOA more responsive and less punitive. Property values actually increased because people wanted to live in a community with functional governance. Sharon served her sentence at the Denver Women's Correctional Facility. I never contacted her, and she never tried to contact me. There was nothing to say. She'd abused her power, endangered residents, and profited from shady deals. Justice had been served. David Whitmore's contracting company went bankrupt under the weight of lawsuits and criminal penalties. He avoided prison but lost everything financially. The courts ordered him to pay restitution that would take decades to fulfill. Patricia Montgomery and Dale Fisher completed their home detention and community service. Both left Colorado afterward, too ashamed to stay. I didn't blame them for following Sharon's lead, but they'd been adults who made choices. They had to live with the consequences. In May, the community held its first spring festival in years. The previous board had canceled it repeatedly due to budget concerns, but the new board made it happen. There were food trucks, a band, activities for kids. The whole development came together in the park on a beautiful Saturday afternoon. I helped man the grilling station with Marcus, flipping burgers and hot dogs for a line of hungry neighbors. It felt good to be part of something positive, to contribute to community building rather than community conflict. "Hey, remember a year ago when you were just the dude with the space heater?" Marcus said, handing me another package of hot dogs. "I'm still just the dude with the space heater." "Nah, man. You're the guy who took down a corrupt HOA. You're a legend. A legend who smells like grilled onions." We laughed. The afternoon sun was warm, the park was full of happy neighbors, and everything felt right. This was what community should be. People coming together, supporting each other, making shared spaces better for everyone. As the festival wound down and we cleaned up, Margaret Foster stopped by. "Isaac, thank you for volunteering today," she said. "Happy to help. I also wanted to tell you that the board voted to name the new boiler room after you, the Isaac Donnelly Heating Facility, a little plaque to commemorate your role in making sure we all stay warm." I didn't know what to say. It was unexpected and oddly touching. You don't have to do that. We want to. It's important to remember what happened, both the bad and the good. You stood up when it mattered. That deserves recognition. The plaque was installed the following week. It was small and tasteful, mounted outside the boiler room with an engraved message. Isaac Donnelly Heating Facility, dedicated to the principle that every resident deserves a warm, safe home. May we never forget that governance is service, not power. When I saw it, I got choked up. This whole experience had started with such a small thing, a space heater I'd bought on sale at Target. But it had become about something much bigger: accountability, justice, and the fundamental right to safety and dignity in your own home. The months continued to pass. Summer arrived, bringing hot weather that made heating concerns seem distant. The community pool opened, properly maintained by licensed contractors. The landscaping was done professionally. Everything that should have been standard all along finally was. In August, on the anniversary of Sharon's conviction, Jennifer invited me to speak at a legal conference about HOA governance and resident rights. It was held at the Colorado Convention Center, attended by lawyers, housing advocates, and legislators. I told the story of my space heater, the citations, the heating failure, and the fight for justice. I talked about the importance of standing up to unreasonable authority, even when it's scary and expensive. I emphasized that HOAs could be valuable when run properly, but needed oversight and accountability to prevent abuse. The audience was engaged, asking thoughtful questions afterward. Several legislators told me they were using my case as evidence for their proposed HOA reform bills. Lawyers asked for Jennifer's contact information to discuss similar cases. It felt surreal to be standing on a stage talking about home heating and HOA bylaws to hundreds of people. But if my experience could help prevent others from going through the same nightmare, it was worth it. That evening, Jennifer and I had dinner at a nice restaurant downtown. She'd become more than just my lawyer. She was a friend. "You know you're going to be dealing with this for years, right?" she said over wine. "Every time there's an HOA dispute in Colorado, someone's going to mention your case." "I can live with that. Better to be known as the space heater guy than to be unknown because I froze to death." Very philosophical. We talked about her other cases, my work, life in general. It was nice to have a conversation that wasn't about legal strategy or HOA governance. But inevitably, we came back to it. "Has anyone from the HOA community reached out to interview you for their publications?" Jennifer asked. "A few. I've mostly declined. I don't want to become the anti-HOA guy. HOAs aren't inherently bad. They just need proper oversight." That's a mature perspective. A lot of people in your position would be on a crusade against HOAs entirely. I thought about it, but I've seen what good governance looks like now, thanks to Margaret and the new board. The problem isn't the concept of an HOA. It's when power-hungry people like Sharon use it as a personal fiefdom. Still, you've changed the conversation in Colorado. That matters. By fall, the legislative reforms had passed. Colorado's new HOA laws required annual facility inspections by licensed professionals, mandatory disclosure of board member conflicts of interest, and a streamlined dispute resolution process for residents. Violations carried actual penalties, not just slaps on the wrist. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. And it had started in part because I'd refused to move a space heater. In October, I got an unexpected letter. It was from Sharon, forwarded through her lawyer. I almost threw it away without reading, but curiosity got the better of me. "Dear Mr. Donnelly," it began, "I am writing to you from the correctional facility where I am serving my sentence. I've had a lot of time to think about my actions and their consequences. I want you to know that I am sorry for how I treated you and the other residents of Pinecrest Valley. I let power and pride cloud my judgment. I convinced myself that I was protecting the community, when really I was just protecting my own authority and financial interests. You were right to fight back. You were right to demand basic safety and dignity. I hope you can forgive me, though I understand if you cannot. I also hope that the community is thriving under new leadership. That was always supposed to be the goal, even though I lost sight of it. Sincerely, Sharon Whitmore." I read it twice. It seemed genuine, though it was hard to say. People facing consequences often express regret, whether they mean it or not. But I wanted to believe she'd had a real change of heart. I didn't respond to the letter, but I didn't throw it away either. I filed it with all the other documents from the case, a record of everything that had happened. As the one-year anniversary of the heating failure approached in late February, the HOA organized a community meeting to reflect on the experience and discuss lessons learned. It was held in the clubhouse, the same room where Sharon had tried to push through the special assessment a year earlier. The atmosphere was completely different now. Instead of anger and chaos, there was thoughtful discussion. Margaret presented a report on everything that had been fixed, updated, and improved. The heating system, obviously, but also roofing, landscaping, parking lot, and pool maintenance. All contracts had been reviewed and renewed with properly licensed, insured companies. The budget was transparent and healthy. "We've come a long way," Margaret said, "but we can't forget what happened. We need to stay vigilant to make sure this never happens again." That means attending meetings, asking questions, and holding your board accountable. Isaac showed us what one person can accomplish by refusing to accept injustice. We should all aspire to that kind of courage. There was applause. I felt my face flush with embarrassment but also pride. After the meeting, the Thompsons approached me. They were both using canes but looked healthy and alert. "Young man, we never properly thanked you," Mr. Thompson said. "If you hadn't fought back when you did, I don't know what would have happened to us during that cold snap." "I'm just glad you're okay," I said. "We're more than okay. We're grateful to live in a community where people look out for each other now. That's because of you." Mrs. Thompson hugged me, and I felt tears prick my eyes. This was what it had all been about. Not legal victories or news coverage, but actual people staying safe and warm in their homes. As winter finally gave way to spring again, completing a full cycle since the nightmare began, I found myself reflecting on everything I'd learned. I'd learned that courage isn't the absence of fear but action despite it. I'd learned that systems can be changed, but it takes persistence and often help from others. I'd learned that small acts of resistance can have ripple effects far beyond what you imagine. I'd also learned that I was tougher than I thought. A year and a half ago, I'd been a quiet software developer who avoided conflict. Now I'd stood up to a corrupt HOA board, endured a lawsuit, testified in court, and helped change state law. It had been terrifying and exhausting, but I'd done it. Most importantly, I'd learned the power of community. I hadn't fought alone. Marcus, Lisa, the Thompsons, Rachel, and dozens of other residents had supported me, joined the lawsuit, and stood together against corruption. Jennifer had provided expert legal guidance. Judge Sanderson had delivered justice. The DA's office had pursued criminal charges. The insurance company had paid the settlement. The new HOA board had restored proper governance. It had taken all of us, working together, to fix what Sharon had broken. On a warm evening in early April, I sat on my small patio with a beer, watching the sunset over the mountains. The space heater was still in my living room, though it hadn't been turned on in weeks. Soon I'd pack it away for the season, stored in my closet until next winter. But I'd never get rid of it. That $39 appliance from Target had become a symbol of something larger: the right to be comfortable and safe in your own home, and the duty to stand up when that right is threatened. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "BBQ at my place Saturday. New neighbors moving into 312 want to meet everyone. Come by." "I'll be there," I replied. Life went on. The community continued to grow and thrive. New residents moved in, attracted by the functional HOA and welcoming atmosphere. Old residents stayed, no longer afraid of arbitrary citations and retaliation. Pinecrest Valley had become what it should have been all along: a place where people lived together cooperatively, supporting each other and maintaining their shared spaces without tyranny or corruption. And it had all started because one cold January morning, I'd refused to remove my space heater from the window. Sometimes the smallest acts of defiance lead to the biggest changes. Sometimes standing your ground, even when it seems pointless, is exactly what needs to happen. I finished my beer and went inside, my properly heated home warm and comfortable around me. The nightmare was over. The community was healed. Justice had been served. And my space heater, silent and unplugged, sat as a reminder that you should never let anyone make you choose between following unjust rules and staying warm. Because warmth isn't just about temperature. It's about dignity, safety, and the fundamental right to live comfortably in the home you own. Sharon had forgotten that. She'd paid the price. And now, thanks to the reforms her downfall had sparked, fewer people would have to fight the same battle I'd fought. That was enough. That was everything.